really imperative that you mute your phone. If you've got a mute button on your phone, please push that right now, or do the star six. Because I can still hear noise out there, and that's really been a problem with some of our webinars, is people not muting their phone, so everyone can hear, and also for the recording to be good for others who may view it at a different time. Okay, so mute your phone with the button or a star six. We're going to get started this evening. If you've got the chat box also, before I forget, the chat box in the lower left, if you're on the webinar platform online, you can actually ask questions via that method. So I would really encourage you to do that as we go here this evening. It helps the process. Okay. And if we will open it up, the phone line later on in a period, if we've got questions over the phone as well. Okay. So if we don't have any questions, I know our first one of our first instructors is on this evening, and we've got a few folks for you this evening to talk about the project that is Sheep. Todd Taylor at Madison Shepherd, and then Rusty Burgett up in Schooner, and then myself, and then Pam Hobson. So we'll move right into a couple of slides before I turn this over to Rusty. I get a lot of questions as it relates to what the enrollment or project enrollment is for kind of more the food animal, meat animal project. And so it's listed below here on this slide. And as you can tell here, horse is the largest enrolled project or animal project, let's say, here in Wisconsin. Poultry doesn't follow too far behind. And then our meat animals, if you add up all the meat animals, beef, sheep, meat goats, and swine, we're over 10,000 project units. So that's a really good story for us to say about the food animals in Wisconsin. Even you can see here in swine is actually larger than dairy up to this point, or it has been for about 3 years. So that's an interesting story that not many know about. For those of you who are new in the project, which are probably a lot of you, what most of the youth that have been and families involved over the last webinars are kids that have been, like 1 to 3 years of the project. And so this is appropriate for you to know where the website is. The website that would help you in knowing programs, events, information, resources is this FYI section on this slide. And for those of you at home with your handout, your PowerPoint handout, it's the page of our website. And there's 2 red arrows. You can follow us on Facebook and all sorts of social media with the red arrow on the upper right. Or you can also, on the bottom where the other red arrow is, you can enter in your email address to receive updates, okay, or email updates. So make sure you enter those things in if you want to receive information, okay? So the topic tonight is sheep, and it's really to set the stage for you younger members and newer families about how the sheep project works, some ideas and thoughts on how you manage your project, and then obviously be successful and find out other opportunities for you to travel around the state, maybe to other states, and get involved in your sheep project. Again, another reminder, please mute your phone, use the mute button on your phone, or star 6 to mute your phone. Okay? Really appreciate you working with us on that. All right? So I'll move this right over to Rusty. Rusty, are you on?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you great. So just to give a little background about Rusty, Rusty actually arrived back here into Wisconsin. Rusty was originally here as a master's student in Wisconsin. Came via the way of Ohio. He left us after his graduate work and went to Iowa State University for a period of time, and then now is back. We are grateful he is back, and is at the Schooner Research Station, um, managing that unit, and also I guess the assistant superintendent for the research station there. So I brought him on board because he's got a wealth of knowledge in sheep, um, and he's a pretty good sheep shearer. So if you ever need a sheep shearer, Rusty would probably help you out. So I'll pass this over to you, Rusty, and I appreciate you helping us out here tonight.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm glad to talk to everyone about how we're going to feed our show lamb. Glad everyone decided to start with the show lamb project. I'm just going to go ahead and spoil the surprise right now. I can't tell you one certain way to feed your sheep. There's 100 different ways to feed our sheep, and there's really no one right way to do it. There's a whole bunch of different ways and opportunities how we can feed these sheep. But we got to start somewhere. So the first place to start with feeding our market lambs is starting off with a high genetic potential in our lambs that we choose. I know we're going to have a section later about selecting our market lamb project. But we want to make sure we're starting with a lamb that has a high genetic potential they can live up to. No matter how we feed them, we cannot fix any structural problems with those lambs. We want to make sure we're starting off with a good base. And there's a big difference between going out picking a lamb just out of the feedlot and a run-of-the-mill lamb versus a lamb that's been specifically bred for the show ring. For all intents and purposes, those are really two different types of animals. So we want to make sure we're getting our lambs from a good reputable breeder, and they're going to start off really well for us in the show ring. When we get our lambs home, we want to start them off right away on a good nutritional plan. And that's going to start off with a highly palatable, high-energy cream. We'll get a little bit more in depth into what these individual feeds are, but we really want to make sure we're starting off with a good base. So what all do we need that's going to be in our sheep? If we look at our next slide, there's a few requirements that every sheep needs, regardless of their age or their size or what stage of production it's in. The most important thing that our sheep require is going to be water. They always need to have access to good, clean, fresh water. And depending on their age and their size, a lamb will drink between a half a gallon and up to 3 gallons per day. It's really important that they have good, clean, fresh water every single day for them. Then no matter what feeds that we choose, we need to make sure that those feeds have a lot of energy for some nice growth for them. These are young lambs. They got a lot of growth potential. They need a lot of energy to grow. They also need to make sure we have a lot of protein in that diet. We'll get specific how much we need. We also need to make sure that we have a good vitamin and mineral program for our sheep. And when we're picking vitamins and minerals, we want to make sure that we're feeding a mineral mix specifically for sheep. There's one mineral in particular that we need to be cautious of, which is copper in our sheep. So copper can actually be toxic to sheep at higher levels. So we can't be feeding a mineral mix that's made for dairy animals or for beef cows or for pigs, because the copper levels of the mineral mix are way too high for our sheep. So when we take a vitamin and mineral mix, we need to figure out or see that it's specifically made just for sheep. Even our goat minerals, they have too high of copper levels for our sheep. They need to have their own special sheep. So looking at a little bit more now the particulars of what we can feed our sheep. So we see on our next slide that there's a bunch of different options. Now, if we're just starting out with our feeder lamb, this is our first time ever raising sheep, one route that we might look at is look at pre-made rations. Now, most of your feed stores and your local feed mills will have these on hand. There's all kind of different brands out there that you can choose from. Just a couple are listed on there in the slide. Big Game, Land O'Lakes, Purina, Showmaster, all sorts of different pre-made show lamb rations out there. There's some really smart nutritionists that figured out really good mixes for everyone. So they kind of did all the grunt work there for us. And if you're starting out, this is your first project, that might be the way to go. We can feed them a little bit cheaper with some custom rations, but it gets a little bit trickier in making those rations. As I said, those custom rations, they're definitely a viable source. Most of your local mills will do a custom feed ration for you, and you can make some supplements that you can add into some homegrown feed, but they get a little bit trickier. And I advise you all to work with the nutritionist at your local feed mill if you're going to go this route, and just have them double check your ration to make sure everything's okay. But if you're going to make your own ration. A few guidelines that you might want to try to keep it at is you might want to try to keep about 18% fruit fiber in their diet. Your sheep are ruminant animals. That means they like to ferment fibrous feed. The monogastrics can't quite do that, so we'll make sure we have about 18% fiber. You also want to range between 15 and 20% free protein in the diet. Now that can change based on how old those animals are. Still want to keep it in that 15 to 20% range. You need to make sure they have enough protein in there because they're growing animals. They need the protein so they can grow that lean muscle mass into some nice healthy lambs. You also want to have about 3% fat in that diet. And the fat is a really good energy source for the lamb. And it's also really good to help out with their lamb and their wool and their hair coat. That fat will make sure that they have a nice, shiny, workable coat for us. They're going to look really fresh on the day of the coat. You also want to work with that calcium to phosphorus ratio of 2 to 1. And this gets a little tricky because we can have a disorder in sheep called urinary calculi. And we want to avoid that, so we can look at the calcium to phosphorus ratio. And the nutritionist at the local mill should be able to help you out with that and balancing out your vitamins and minerals. But no matter which way we choose, if you look at the pre-made rations or custom rations, we want to make sure we're offering at least one handful of forage every day. That should be a highly palatable, highly digestible hay that they're fed every day to keep the rumen stomach nice, happy, and healthy, and make sure the lambs are feeling good. So we can feed a bunch of different feeds in these rations. Just to name a few, in some of these pictures, you can see corn or dried distillers grains, which is up in the top right-hand corner, soybean meal and different soy products, cottonseed meal. There's a whole big long list of things that we can feed. The byproducts in the ethanol markets are getting very popular right now. So there's definitely a viable feed source for us. And most of your mills can put those into a pelleted feed so they're all pre-mixed and they're all ready to go for it. It's definitely a good option, especially if you're starting. There's a couple different ways that we can feed these. If we look at the next slide, we can see that there's two popular ways, which is self-feeders or limit feeders. So there's pros and cons to both of those. If we start on the left-hand side with the self-feeders, so these are big feeders. They hold a large quantity of feed. You can put a few days worth of feed into these things, and you can feed a lot of lambs all at one time. The benefits are you can still do less frequently. There's less labor involved. The lambs always have access to that feed. So one of the downfalls is you can't really monitor how much each lamb is eating every day. Because they have the option to build whatever they want. They can eat as much as they want throughout the day. Another kind of downfall to this, control lambs, lambs can get what they call the hay belly. So if they go and eat a really large meal, and they kind of lay around for a while, they can get kind of big through the midsection. It's not really high appealing for control lambs. So one way to kind of get around that is to go to a limit feeding system. So this is where we feed several small meals throughout the day instead of allowing those lambs to have access all day long. This does require a little bit more labor. You have to go out there and you have to feed each meal to the sheep. But that could also be a good thing because you can get out there and you can look at your lambs 4 times throughout the day. And you can also monitor how much each lamb is eating every single day. Another benefit is that they have clean, fresh feed to them every single day. The self-feeders, if the feed is in there for 4 or 5 days, that feed might just be just a little bit stale. So how do we know how much we need to feed our lambs? If we go into the next slide, we can see that it's really going to depend on what stage or how fast these lambs are growing. So in order to know how much to feed them, we need to make sure that we're weighing our lambs on a regular basis. It wouldn't be a bad idea to weigh our lambs every single week to know how fast they're growing. So this is really important because we want to adjust our feed intake as they're growing. The heavier that the lambs get, the more feed that they're going to require. And we want to make sure that we're keeping our lambs on a positive nutrition plan. Now, a positive nutrition plan means it's shown in the graph on the bottom left-hand side. Now we can see across the bottom of the graph is the approximate days of age, and across the vertical axis is how many pounds those lambs weigh. We want to make sure that those lambs are constantly growing. And we want to go from the day that we get them to the show day. They should always be gaining weight up until that show day. Sometimes we can push our lambs too fast early on, so our lambs will get too heavy on us. So if we get a few weeks before the show, we realize that our lambs are weighing we try to do is we try to decrease the amount of feed that they're eating and try to hold those lambs. And that's generally a little bit more difficult to do than to push those lambs on feed all the way up to the show day. And having them on that positive nutrition plane, that's going to make sure our lambs always have good, clean energy in front of them. They're going to look nice and fresh on the day of the show. Now, if we have to load our lambs, those lambs might look just a little bit more stale on the day of the show, as opposed to if they had a bunch of feed right before the show. So I wish you keep in mind that it's always easier to push those lambs than it is to hold them. So weighing those lambs on a regular basis and adjusting the feed accordingly can really help us out. If those lambs start growing too fast on us, we can slow up how fast they grow by just decreasing the amount of feed that they're having every day. So we'll make sure that they're eating every single day. So some of the key points I really want you guys to remember are on the next slide that we need to get our lambs off to a really good start. Start with a good genetic base. Also with a good, clean, palatable creek feed. And then always want to have a good palatable feed. And by palatable, I mean I want that feed to taste really well. Really good. I want those lambs to want to go up and eat every single meal that they eat. Our lambs always need to have access to clean and fresh water 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We'll be feeding clean, fresh feed. We're going to weigh our lambs to adjust that feed intake. That's really important to exercise and work with our lambs. I know Todd is going to talk about that here shortly. But the more we can work with our lambs, the more interaction we have, the more indicators we have of the animal's health and how fast they're growing. We can adjust our feed. The most important part is to have fun with them and keep learning with our product. So if you guys have any general questions, I don't know, Burgett, if we're going to take questions at this time. But if you guys ever have any questions, my email is listed on the next slide. I can help you out with more in-depth questions. This is kind of a broad overview of feeding of our sheep.
Thanks, Rusty. So can you maybe just comment as it relates to, okay, now I've got a lamb that, I kind of got away from you. Maybe you were on vacation and didn't, pitch it close enough, but boy, it's going to be really too heavy for the fair. Any thoughts on how to manage holding or slowing up a lamb that's still in the mindset of the animal and the care of the animal, but can maybe slow them down and things that, new families and new members might want to do if they do have a lamb that kind of gets away from them weight-wise?
Sure. If we have a lamb that kind of gets away from us, the absolute worst thing that we can do is completely take away all the feed. We don't want to do that. We don't ever want to have our lamb going without food for more than a day. It's not helpful to the animal. It's just not the right thing to do. I wouldn't want to go a day without food. So I don't want my lamb to go a day without food either. One thing that we can do is we can adjust our feed ration just a little bit. Maybe we can reduce the amount of energy in that diet. Maybe we can cut some of the starch or some of the corn out of the diet. And feed a little bit more of a high fiber diet. We generally don't want to feed more hay because that's going to lead to that hay belly syndrome that I was talking about. But you can feed other feeds. Most of the pelleted feeds will have things like soy hulls in them, which are a high fiber diet, a low energy diet. So the lambs will still be eating, but they won't be gaining weight quite as fast as they normally would on the high energy diet.
Great. So does anybody have any questions for Rusty? Again, you can put them on the chat box. And why don't we're going to move right through to our next speaker, and so we make sure we've got time for all the information. And just keep shooting those questions through, and hopefully Rusty can comment on those as we move through here as well. Okay? So Todd, are you on? You are the next one up.
I am on. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. So Todd Taylor is our UW Madison shepherd. He has been with UW Madison 13, about the same time as me, I guess, 13 plus years. And his family as well is very active in 4-H, and their children have been active in showing all sorts of different breeds and feeds. And so I've asked Todd to really talk about the sitting and showing and breaking aspects of the project. So Todd, I'll leave it up to you.
Thanks, Bernie. As Bernie said, we've been in Wisconsin for not quite 13 years yet. I grew up in Wyoming with the 4-H project and went through this whole program there's a few that'll be up there a little bit bigger than that, but it's good to start with them as soon as you get home. And you know, the more you work with them, the more often you're around them, you know, the easier they're going to be to work with through the summer. You can always tell kids in the show ring that all they get done is go to the barn and throw a little feed and check their water bucket and then go back to the house. I mean, you can tell those lambs just don't act the same way as the kids spend time out working with them and handling them and being gentle and patient, just going above and beyond just feeding them on a daily basis. So I can't stress that enough, that the more work you put in the beginning, the better they're going to be and the more successful you're going to be at the end. Training, as I said, starts at home, and we've kind of got a 4-step system. The next slide talks about that. We try to start out with halter breaking, move into breaking, halter breaking them by simply tying them to a fence. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. Then we work on breaking them to lead slowly, and then, you know, the more we get them broke to lead, the farther we walk them. We exercise all of our lambs most of the way through the summer just by leading them down the road on a halter, on a gentle, you know, steady walk. We might run them a little bit towards the end when we're trying to fine tune them, but most of the time, most of our sheep just get broke to lead and led, exercise on a daily basis. And this includes the breeding sheep as well. We do both our market lambs and our breeding sheep about the same way. And then once we get a little closer to some of the fairs, you know, especially when the kids finally get out of school and can spend some more time, then we'll start teaching them and training them to show and fitting some dirt towards the tail end. So we start with that system. Like I said, the first thing is halter breaking. And this is the one tool that every sheep program, you've got to have a good halter. And I'm not just a fan of halter. It needs to be a good halter that fits more sheep. I know you can get halters at Farm and Fleet. You can get halters at Tractor Supply. Some of the NASCO halters you can order. You know, they're pretty generic halters. And to be honest with you, most of the ones that I've gotten from those organizations, the nose piece is way too big. And they're, I think, more suited for calves and not so good for sheep. So I usually recommend that you go to a sheep company that raises or that sells sheep supplies and buy a good sheep halter. They've been fitted a little bit better to go across the bridge of the nose. And you might even think about getting a couple of different ones, one that's a little bit smaller to train your lambs early on. And again, like I said, the critical part is that piece that goes across the bridge of the nose. And if Bernie will go ahead and go to the next slide, I can show you what I'm talking about. If you look in the picture on the right, that halter's been placed on right. The two halters on the left have got some problems. And like I said, it starts with that nose piece that goes up and across the bridge of the nose. If that's too big, you're going to struggle with the lambs when they start fighting and fussing, and it's going to tighten down too tight on their nose, and they're not going to be able to breathe. But the halter is built, it's one piece of rope that's fitted all the way around. The lead itself, the actual part that you're going to hold on to when you lead these sheep, needs to come out of the left side, below the left ear of the sheep, or below the left, between the left eye and the nostril there on that side. And that same piece goes underneath the jaw. A lot of people like either put that piece over the top of the nose, over the bridge, or have the lead go around behind the ears. And that's not what you want. You want that lead to come, just like a calf halter with the chain on it. You want that chain under their jaw. Same thing with the sheep halter. You want that halter, the lead part of it, the part that you're tugging on when you're fighting with them, needs to go under their jaw and then come around behind their ears from right to left. And then, like I said, this piece fits over the nose, just about halfway between the nose and the muzzle. If you get it too low, you're going to cut off the wind, and they're not going to be able to breathe as it tightens. If you get it too high, it's going to get up in their eyes, and they're going to struggle. So be sure to look at that halter and make sure you've got it on correct. Always, like I said, on the left-hand side of it with the lead under the nose or under the muzzle, and you'll have a much better chance of training these sheep to lead. Then when you tie them to the fence the first time, and this is how we just halter break them by tying them to the fence. The first time you tie these lambs up, they're going to fight, they're going to kick, they're going to squirm, and odds are they're going to turn themselves upside down at least once. It's just the life of the sheep. I always train my kids to tie them low and close to a sturdy fence. Don't tie them to a wire, net wire fence out in the pasture. Tie them to a post or something like that, and tie them fairly close. And also tie them so that if you can learn how to tie a slip knot, tie them in a slip knot so that you can grab the end of it and pull it loose and let them go if they do get upside down.
very incorrectly. We don't want to leave near that much lead, because if that animal gets spooked and hits the end of that halter, she could potentially break her neck, and it doesn't take much to do it. If they get spooked, so you want to tie them close that first time, and the reason for tying them low like that is so that if they do fight, they can lay down on their bellies and still keep their heads up, and they're not going to hang themselves. As you move along and get them a little bit more used to standing and more comfortable on the halter, then you can start tying them a little bit higher, at least getting them to where they're. The next slide shows that they're just a little bit higher, a little bit more the posture that you're going to want them to stand in the show ring. You can gently or gradually start tying them with their heads up a little bit more. But again, you're still tying them fairly close to the fence. And the other thing I suggest my kids do is we tie up definitely more than one at a time. We never leave one alone if we can help it. Because again, they are social animals, and they will tend to settle down a little bit more if there's others around them. Especially one that's been halter broke before helps a little bit, just to kind of ease the pressure on the others. So that gets us through halter breaking. Day or two of that, day or two standing on the fence, and we may even start at day one breaking them to lead on a halter. My young son here on the right is working with this ewe lamb. I imagine my wife is there somewhere behind, kind of helping with the go button to get that lamb encouraged to go forward. He's got a hold of the halter up close to the head and just some gentle pressure. It can be a tug of war battle for the first couple of days, but if you're patient, persistent, eventually you'll get them used to you. And then, once we get them going, we'll take off down the road with a mad group of lambs like this, and it's probably always fun to see what kind of looks we get from traffic as it goes by on the county road there that we lead our sheep up and down. So we get them broke to lead on the halter. This, we'll lead them just gentle like this for probably the rest of the school year. We'll start working ours here pretty quick, getting them ready to start walking up and down the road. We won't again start training probably until the kids get out of school in June. The next slide kind of shows the method that we use. We usually start with teaching them to lead without a halter. This is kind of the steps we take to train them for the show ring. Teach them to start leading without a halter first. We'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. Train them to stop and set their feet. If you can get a lamb that'll naturally set his feet where he needs to go, it sure helps in the show ring if the kids don't have to reach around and set their feet up on their own. And then, of course, you want to teach these market lambs to lean into you and brace as hard as they will to just accentuate that muscle pattern as much as possible, show off the muscularity of your lamb. And then we try to get a group of kids together, or at least I've got enough kids between my kids and my nieces that we can have a pretty good practice show ring quite often and practice the etiquette and training, or the etiquette show ring methods that you need to know, moving around the ring, paying attention to judging, some of those kind of things. So again, we'll start off by teaching them to lead without a halter. Next slide talks about that a little bit. Critical part there again is your hand placement. Most judges will have you walk around the ring in trying to think, it would be a left to right rotation essentially in front of him. So you're going to stand on the left hand side of the sheep. Your left hand should be under the jaw, under the muzzle, close to the back of the jaw, close to right there where the neck and the jaw meet, not back where they're choking them, but you kind of can feel their back teeth with your fingers if you've got your left hand in the right spot. And then your right hand can go behind the ears to help keep control of that lamb. Once you get them to where they're used to walking around the ring, you don't have to use much pressure with that right hand to get them to go. They'll just kind of gently follow their way around the ring, and should be able to do that. If you do need to help, proper etiquette to get them to move. A lot of times if you reach back and grab their tail where they've been docked, just lift up on that last joint or two that's left there, that will help encourage them to walk forward. So, but you got to keep control with your left hand while you're doing that. A proper hand placement is critical. And then as you're walking around the ring, just walk slow and steady. Just keep it at a nice even pace. It doesn't have to be fast, but you don't want to just kind of lollygag along either. And you also want to be courteous to the person in front and behind you. Don't ever pass anybody in the show ring unless the judge indicates that you need to. If somebody stops and struggles in front of you, be patient, wait, or even reach up and help them move their lamb forward if you can without losing control of yours. But like I said, think about the people in front, behind you, and be sure to give everybody their ample space. Proper feet placement in the show ring. If we'll move to the next slide, you want to see them on square corners with their feet right straight down to the ground as evenly and as squarely as possible. This can be done by lifting them with your hands. Little kids sometimes will struggle with this a little bit, but you can reach back and set those legs. The front feet are usually the easiest ones to set. I always train my kids, my little guys, to where they set the back foot closest to them. So, for instance, this is my daughter, and in that picture on the top right, she's got the hind foot right there closest to her is probably forward a little too far. If it was a little kid, what I'd tell them to do is slide your right hand down and just kind of push that foot back just about an inch, and then back the two front feet up to match it. So in other words, they're never having to reach over the top, and definitely don't want to reach underneath that sheep to set that far hind foot. Set kind of 3 feet to that 1 foot, and it's much easier for kids that are struggle a little bit to reach that offside foot. Now bigger kids can reach over the top and reach that far right hind foot and set it where it needs to be. But again, you want those feet as straight and square on the corners. She's really done a nice job of setting the U up in the bottom left corner. She's set up just about perfect. And the other thing that I really like about it is she's got the head held nice and high, straight out of the top of the shoulders. The nose could turn just a little bit more so that it's looking straight ahead. But for this picture, it's a really, really pretty view. And the other thing is we want these animals to try to be fairly level down their top as well. So either you can see she likes to kneel down or squat down beside the lamb, kind of hide herself and show off the lamb a little bit more. And she'll even kind of just poke or tickle the belly on this lamb just a little bit to bring that top line up. Breeding sheep, you can usually get away with doing this. Most market lamb judges nowadays really want you to stay up and keep that lamb bracing at all times. And if you do train it to brace right, that'll bring that top line up as well. So continuing on, again, on market lambs, like I said, they're a little, we do show market lambs just a tad bit different than breeding sheep in that we do want them to brace as much as possible. And when I talk about brace, they need to push. They need to actually put some power into you so that they're tense when that judge comes up and handles them, or firm, I should say. Because that's part of what we're trying to do is show off that muscularity, show off that correctness to finish, and that extra push that they push into the showman helps accentuate that a little bit. So we still want them set as close to square on the 4 corners as we can. And again, we want their heads still just as high out of the top of their shoulders as we can, and that level top line if we can get it. But then we just want that lamb to lean slightly, not just throw those hind feet out behind them where they stretch out. That's a common mistake I see at the county level. These kids get them too stretched out when they make them brace. You still want to keep their feet fairly square. You just kind of want them to lean and push into your knee or the inside of your thigh if you're a little bit taller, and kind of turn that toe so it's perpendicular with the lamb, so that, like I said, they're coming into the side of your knee. You always want to make sure that you're on the back side of the lamb away from the judge, so that you're not hiding any part of the lamb when you're showing off that side profile. So in the show ring, again, you want to make sure that you kind of pay attention to your surroundings. You're usually going to walk into the ring, and the judge is going to line up, or the ringman's going to line you up. Usually for a rear view to start with. That's usually when I'm judging. That's the view I like to start with. So we'll find a fence line somewhere that's long enough that we can get the entire class in there side to side. Couple of things to think about is make sure you stay off the fence at least 3 or 4 feet, enough that the judge can walk in front of the lamb if he would like to. And then again, give yourself, 1.5 to 2 foot between the lambs on either side of you. So when you come in and line up, hopefully you've got some ringman help that can sometimes help to organize your class. But just make sure that you line yourself up. You've got good adequate spacing, ample spacing all the way around. And then pay attention to where the judge is. Try to keep your line straight. Watch where the judge is. And make sure your lamb is always between you and the judge. The judge isn't really there to see you. He's there to see what you raised all summer long. So make sure you're showing off that lamb and not necessarily yourself. Be courteous and watch out for all the rest of your competitors in the ring. And above all, go out there and have fun. Have a smile on your face. Enjoy it. Interact with the judge if he allows you to. There's no problem with that. I enjoy to kind of try to crack a smile on the kids' faces when I'm judging, and it just makes us feel like we're a little bit more personable and not there to just kind of make one person happy and make everybody else upset at you. So go out and have fun. Hey, now this can be all kinds of crazy things here. These 3 slides I put in here are tools that we use in a market land project. I'm not saying you got to go out and rush and buy every one of these because they are expensive, but they are all things that will definitely help you in the long run. Maybe you can get together as a group and invest in some of these things and share them. Maybe your county has got some funds that they can buy some of these things and help you out with, but you're going to probably need some sort of a trim stand to get these lambs up on, get them restrained so that you can shear them. The shearing equipment, there's 2 different kinds there. The big machine here on the bottom left corner is a Sunbeam or a Stewart Oster Shearmaster that's set up with sheep shearing heads on it. These we simply use them for rough shearing or taking the majority of the wool off. They're not going to put the finishing touches on the lambs, so to speak, but they're going to get the majority of it off so that we do go back and put on the finishing touches. It's a whole lot easier. Typically when we buy our lambs, or I should say when we buy our lambs, when we wean our lambs and put them in the barn to get them ready to start feeding for the summer, we will rough shear them with what's a 13-tooth comb, which is essentially just used to take the wool off of the majority of our ewe flock anyway. It does take some experience to utilize that comb because you can cause some skin scratches and make a few cuts if you're not careful with them because they are a little bit coarser teeth. But they do take the majority of the wool off and make the lambs much easier to see, much easier to evaluate and watch as they grow through the summer, cools them off a little bit. And then we may rough shear them again one more time middle of the summer, especially if we're getting within a couple of weeks of the show and they're getting an inch of wool on them. They get pretty hard to clean up and get ready for the fair if they've got that much wool on them. So we might do that again, 2 to 3 weeks before our shows are coming up. And then the machines in the middle, that is actually a stablemate, a Lister stablemate with a couple different kinds of blades. I think there's some wall blades there and premier blades there. I'm not sure what I've got in that picture, but those are rated as fine blades. They make about 6 different styles of this. It's a hair blade, more rated as a hair blade, but it does a much smoother, much finer job of shearing. You do need to watch what you get though, because you can get everywhere from what they call a surgical blade up to a coarse blade. Most lambs, especially white fibered or white skinned lambs, you probably want to shear with nothing finer than a fine blade. The surgical blades will make them really, really peak, and you're not going to like that. I suggest that the fine blade is about as fine as you want to use. You could even use some mediums sometimes, but the mediums, if you shear them 2 or 3 days ahead of the fair, the mediums will make the lamb just a little bit drier to the touch when the judges handle them. So we usually like to shear most of ours with the fine blades, and that's about as good as we get. So to start with, as I said, if we move to the next slide, we will rough shear all of our lambs. Roughly, like I said, we'll rough shear them roughly a week to even a month ahead. You can get away with doing it a couple of days ahead, but you do want a little bit of return growth because it does make it easier when you do go back and shear with the fine blade. And then when we're getting ready to shear them for the show, which we might do either the day of the show or probably not more than 2 or 3 days before the show on our medium wool or our blackface sheep, our Southdowns, the breeding Southdowns that we show, we shear them about a week before the show or 5 days before the show. But all of our market lambs, we usually have them shorn within a couple of days of show day. We wash them first, and that's just with, if we can get warm water, it's better because it does help with break up the lanolin in the wool, but cold water will work. And then just use something like a Dawn dish soap or ivory soap. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. The livestock soaps are fine, but you don't have to go to that investment. Just wash them. Make sure that you get all the soap out of them. Make sure you get as much of the oil and grease out of them as you can, because then your fine blades will work better. And then again, like I said, we shear them the day of the show. And one thing I didn't think about, or a few days before the show, one thing I didn't think about taking a picture of is a blanket. We do put blankets on our sheep after we shear them, mostly just to keep them clean. You don't necessarily have to. You could rinse them off the morning of the show if they get a little dirt on them with no wool on them. They're really easy to wash. make sure that they're not sopping wet or even much damp at all when they go out in the show ring. On a hot day, sometimes if you got a hot day that you're showing on, it might not hurt to wash them a couple hours before the show just to cool them down a little bit. You want to be careful if they're too hot. You don't want to cool them down too fast, but it might not hurt to rinse them off a little bit. But there are blankets that some of the companies. I don't necessarily like the tubes, the socks that they sell, because they don't breathe real well when it gets hot, and they can tend to make the lambs get even hotter in those tubes. But some of the canvas blankets that they sell work really well to help keep the lambs cool on a hot day as well. All right, if we go on to the next slide, I just was going to touch base a little bit on fitting breeding sheep. I don't know how many people on here are really interested in the breeding sheep program versus market lambs, but it can get a lot more in detail, in depth. There's a lot of different breeds out there, a lot of different fitting styles, just a lot of other things that can be added in. We're going to do a lot of the breeds will be slick shorn, just like the market lambs. So you're going to use the fine blades again. Then there's other breeds that we're going to leave wool on, and we're going to actually block them with a set of hand shears, like you see up in the right hand. So use a curry comb and a wool card, and a set of hand shears, like you see up in the right hand corner. And if you really want to get extreme, and I thought about throwing a picture of it in here, you can leave wool on them, and you can actually what we call cut them out, or shear certain areas down tighter and leave wool in areas where we want to try to build the perfect sheep with the wool that's on them. So we're kind of sculpturing these sheep. You go to the next slide. Wool breeds. So in other words, if you look at this picture in the right hand side here, this is kind of the three different styles that you're going to see sheep fit in a breeding sheep show, especially at the state fair, or if you go to some of the major national shows. These are the three different ways. The two south downs in the front row were both slick shorn, just like we talked about on the south end. They were probably shorn with a fine hair blade within about 3 or 4 days of the show. The big Suffolk ewe in the back, on the back left corner, the black face, you could just see her legs and her body. She was probably shorn to the hide about 45 days before the show, or maybe even cut out like we talked about a little bit. And then she was washed, and completely washed and almost bleached white, and then touched up with a set of those hand shears, and just smoothed up and finished up. And then the white ewe that you see in the front, or I shouldn't say the white ewe, the gray ewe, that happens to be one of our Columbia ewes that we showed last summer. And she was literally sculptured, essentially. We sheared her belly slick, but we took a set of those 13-tooth blades and really did a pattern job on her. But you can see she has not been washed, and that's one big thing I want to stress. If you do get into a wool breed sheep, you need to research your breeds and see what are considered a wool breed versus a meat breed. The wool breed sheep, you don't want to wash them. When you wash them, you take the character out of their wool, out of their fleece, and that's part of their scorecard. That's part of what they're going to be judged on, is how their fleece looks. And if you wash them, it really makes it hard to evaluate. And I feel sorry for kids who wash wool breed sheep anyway, because it's got to take a long time to get them clean. They've got so much more oil in their fleeces that they're just almost impossible to wash completely down to the white that you see on the other three. So, and again, like I said, some breeds that you might get into, if you get into showing South Downs or Shropshires, those two breed associations have voted to make it mandatory that in the show ring, those breeds are shown slick shorn, similar to a market lamb, which makes them pretty popular because they are much easier to fit and get ready to show. And some of you will probably want to show commercial ewes. Typically I like to see the commercial ewes slick shorn, or at least shorn within a week to 10 days of the show, and let them just kind of be in natural condition. If you want to wash them, that's fine as well on a black-faced commercial ewe. I think that's probably the end. Oh, I did add one slide on here. These are some companies that you can go to. Most of these have a website. Profiles may not yet, but I think they do. They're a local company here in Wisconsin. Of course, NASCO is in Fort Atkinson. Mid-States Wool Growers has 2 warehouses, one in Ohio and one in Kansas, but they do have a good website that you can order, fitting equipment, shearing equipment. And then Sullivan Show Supplies is kind of the national chain of some of the real high-dollar, high-end products that you might use but they'll also carry just about everything they do do have a trim stand. They do carry most of the shearing equipment, some of those kind of things.
Okay, thanks, Todd. I just put on the chat box if anybody's got any questions for Todd while you guys are formulating some questions and still to keep us on time. I have a couple that I always get, Todd, and perhaps you have some thoughts too. One question is, what do you do with the lamb that just won't break? Any thoughts for folks on how to get that lamb to do better at that?
I was waiting for that question. We always have one or two every year that does that. And one trick that I learned when I was a kid with my dad, and it does work on some lambs, but not others. But I like it because to me, it's probably the safest and maybe the most gentle on the lambs. We find a place back in the corner of maybe our show ring, where it's kind of a little bit more protected, mostly from grandma falling in holes. But we dig holes that are about 18 inches deep and just wide enough that, the lamb can't miss them. Probably 18 inches deep, maybe 12 inches long and 6 or 8 inches wide, and fill them with water. And I guess they don't even have to be 18 inches deep, probably only about 8 inches deep now that I think about it. Just fill them with water. Walk that lamb around like you're in the show ring and stop him in front of one of those holes and set him up. And then push your knee into him just like you always have been. And when he backs up, most lambs don't like to hit water. And they'll typically come barreling out of that hole. Now you want to have him in several different locations so that he doesn't get used to just that spot making him back in the water. So you want a few of them. But that will sometimes work. There's also and I don't have a plan for it. I need to look it up, and I probably should build one. There's also what they call a brace box. Essentially, it's just a platform. I think it's probably 4x8 or it may be 8x8, and then you'll tip it just a little bit. You'll just kind of put it on an incline, and again, it's only about 6 inches or 8 inches off the ground. I want to say it's made with 2x8 probably on the 4 sides and plywood over the top. And then again, I don't remember the incline, but there is a little bit you do put a little bit of an incline under it. Of course, if you do it right, you can change the incline from side to side on all 4 sides. You just set the lamb up on top of it. As he backs up, he backs off of that. And, again, once they lose their footing, they get a little bit nervous. And that will sometimes work. I've seen people back them off of trim stands. I don't necessarily like that because it does tend to skin up the front of their hind leg. I guess I would look into either the holes in the ground that works for us or go online and see if you can Google brace box for show lambs and see if a plan and a plan and instructions on how to use it shows up. I'm sure it'll show up somewhere.
Okay, that's a great response. The other one is, when you're showing lambs, the whole switching to the other side is such a conversation. Just to preface, get everybody up to speed, when you're showing, as Todd had said, usually you're on the left side of the lamb. And when judges kind of come through the front to view the front, some kids, move to the other side, some don't. Preference, thoughts on that to give guidance as it relates, especially to the young showmen who may not have the greatest control yet of their lamb?
Right. The way I tell kids when I'm judging showmanship is step back away from that lamb. Make sure the front feet are set up. Step back away from that lamb so you're behind the shoulder blade on whatever side you're on and stay there. If the kid next to you moves around, then you got to get out of the way. But the other thing I tell kids is watch the judge's eye. And his eye, as long as he's looking at your lamb, don't move. When he goes to the next lamb or he goes 2 lambs ahead of you, then you can switch to the other side. Now, if you just decide you want to stay on the side you're on, that's fine, because all he's really looking at when he's looking at the front end of that lamb is the front feet and the shoulders and the way the head comes out of the top of those shoulders. So he's not looking at the rest of the lamb that you're covering up anyway. One thing to never do is don't ever go around behind your lamb or step over the top of it. You risk losing it, you risk losing control, and it could be a real wreck in the show ring. So the other thing is when you do move in front of your lamb, do it efficiently, but not in a hurry. I mean, take your time. Don't spook the lamb. Make it look like just a smooth, easy, gentle motion. Don't, flip real quick and fumble with your hands and let the lamb get away from you. But again, the biggest thing is when regardless of which side he's on, just make sure that you're back behind the shoulder blade on whichever, if you can reach it, still hold the head up. Try to step back to where you're behind the shoulder blade. You're going to be fine. And then you can move to the other side whenever you're comfortable. But don't get in his way while he's looking at the front end of your lamb.
Okay, great. Thanks, Todd. I think in lieu of time, I'm just going to start moving through the next portion, and that's my portion, I guess. If Todd, if you need to jet and do some other work, I appreciate your time on, and if you're able to stay with us, that'd be great. Either way, it's fine with me. Thanks again, Todd, for your time this evening. You did a great job.
Thank you, Brittany. I'm fine for a while, so if you got more questions, that's fine.
Okay, so I'm going to work through the selection, how to pick out that great prospect lamb, and that's probably what you guys are all doing right now, or in the timing of how we work our project here in Wisconsin. Most of your counties will be having weigh-ins here shortly, probably the next couple weeks to 3 weeks here, mostly in the month of May. So now should be the time you're looking for that project lamb. And so some things to look at. I know sometimes in project lambs, it's a little more challenging perhaps to see what that lamb is going to look like at the end of its feeding phase, right, when it's market weight. But with a few things and a few tips here in the next few slides on selection, hopefully you can find a real nice ideal project lamb. So most of the exhibitors we have are really interested in the market project, and Todd has kind of talked about that already, more about on the breeding side. We don't have as much enrollment, but although it's a great project. So a couple of things in the market lambs that you should look for, first and foremost, is muffling, right? Market lambs, their purpose is to be harvested and used for food for consumers. And so, looking at that, we're going to be looking for a lamb that has some muffling. And so in those bulleted items there's some places that you can look. From front to rear, how wide they are, how much width they have over their top, usually indicates how wide their loin is. And then, of course, how much muscle expression and width that you can see down and through their leg. And this picture on the slide does a really nice job of kind of showing the three dimensions. When we talk about animal evaluation, whether it's sheep, pig, cattle, we usually talk about three-dimensional width, or length, depth, all of those three indications for muscle, because we want these animals to have some muscle expression. And so looking for all those indicators are important. As you can see here on the lamb, on the picture on the slide, you really want them to have a lot of width of leg, depth of leg, a lot of width down their top. We also talked about width over their rack, and that's the point where Todd was talking about the shoulder, or right behind the shoulder. There's a big width of rack there that we would get lamb or rib chops from. So we want that animal to have some muscle expression down their top. Okay. Finished, we don't want them to be too finished, especially now when you're picking them up. They most likely will not. You can usually feel finish over their ribs, their forerib and their rear rib along the side of their body. And as you're working through your project and feeding them, as Rusty had kind of talked about, you might want to just make sure you're kind of handling your animal and making sure it's not getting too over finished. It's hard to describe this now, but usually, we talk about having, if you had your fingers in a fist, and if you just went over the lower part of your fingers, that should be about what the ribs should feel like on a nicely done lamb. We have usually it doesn't take a lamb very much to be finished. If you've got a ruler out, anywhere from about 0.2-ish tenths of inches of fat is about a done lamb. So it doesn't take much for that lamb to be more finished. And that's usually, spoken really towards the show lambs. Industry lambs for sure will be usually fatter than that. Okay, confirmation. Really that we talk about that as it relates to balance. Usually just making sure the animal, if it's going to weigh 150 pounds, that it has the frame to stay 150 pounds. It should be a lamb that's a little larger frame, etc. Okay. Moving to the next slide, balance is kind of what I wanted to get at. In this picture, you can see that this lamb is really balanced. And what we mean by that is that it's really strong top or really level from their shoulder all the way out their dock. They're basically, you can flip a quarter right off their back, right? But sometimes you do find lambs that kind of sit behind their shoulder or they're steep out of their rump or out their dock. And so that doesn't show as nice of a profile to a judge. And so trying to find that lamb that can be as level topped and strong as you can is good. Sometimes you might run into some structural problems if they're too straight shouldered or straight fronted. But think about that as you're looking through the animals. They need to have a good angle, a nice angle to their shoulder so they don't get too straight fronted on you as you go through your project. They should have some capacity. Some people don't like that word capacity. Those of you who know Ron Russell, he does not like that word. But it's a really good word to help describe volume, depth of body, depth of rib. You want those lambs to have some depth of body. Even this picture of this lamb could have some more depth of rib, in my opinion. I think sometimes we kind of ebb and flow in the industries as to what's acceptable or what we're looking for at this time, in the decade, right? So we are looking for lambs right now that have a little more depth and have a little more rib. We're certainly looking for that in the swine world. So, keeping that in mind, making sure they've got enough middle to look proportionally correct. Okay? And then structural correctness. Here's a nice slide from Ohio State that talks about the leg and feet structure kind of challenges. We don't have time to go through this in too much detail, but you can obviously see where setting their feet correctly, like Todd had talked about, you might have a lamb that's maybe a little bit pigeon-toed or a little splay-footed. Perhaps you can really set that lamb up nice in the front so it doesn't show that. Market animals and structure, super important, no, but in close decisions, in close pairs, perhaps the judge will use, and most likely will use, a lamb that's more structurally correct. Okay. All right. In the breeding world, things are really very much the same ball game. Having too much fat or make sure their condition is appropriate for their size. Make sure they've got a lot of depth of rib because for sure these ewes most likely will be hopefully bred and be able to carry offspring. So having enough rib space is important. And having the frame size for the right amount of body depth that they've had too, so they look proportionally correct. Another big thing to talk about is breed character. Todd talked about showing Columbia's. South Downs is a really big breed here in Wisconsin, as well as nationally. Make sure you look up the breed character criteria for your breed and make sure that they fit them as best as they can. Or if you're going to go to a sale and purchase a ewe, make sure that they really got all of the right things going for them in that regard. Okay? We talked about balance. And then one thing that's a little bit different as we compare in looking for market lambs is make sure that they have some femininity. Make sure that they look like a ewe, that they're not masculine. They've got some length of body, some length of front, that they've got a nice face, that they look feminine. Sometimes ewes are pretty coarse or can be coarse-fronted or coarse-shouldered. Those things are fine as long as you can get that matches with the rest of the ewe. Is she wide from front to rear as well? So think about those things as you're looking for your selection animals here this time of year. As you're purchasing, here's some other things to think about. Todd, or I think actually Rusty had commented about, make sure you are getting them from known sources, either from your own herd or from some respected friends and colleagues that are suggesting others to go and buy from. Really just do some homework because, this is going to be your project for the year. You're going to invest money, time, and family time, we hope. So you want it to be starting off with a good experience. Make sure you ask producers for vaccination, programs, what have they vaccinated with. Just get all of that kind of paperwork and health concern thoughts asked so you know what you're dealing with. Have they been wormed? What overeating shots have they been given? Those types of things. Okay. Also, cool. Okay. Of course, Todd talked about getting an appropriate sized animal. Do a little math about when your fair is that you'll be taking these animals to, and think about what size animal you should be purchasing. I know it's kind of hard, especially for new ones, new families, when you don't know how fast they're going to grow. Genetics kind of contributes to that, so try and keep all of that in mind when you're buying them. Todd gave you a good range of 60 to 80 pounds. It's always better to buy a lighter animal if you know that they're going to gain well and we're going to have a delightful summer. I think after the winter we've had, we should have a delightful summer, but you never know. It could get really hot and animals don't want to eat, or it could be really cool and they'll eat very well and they'll be overweight. So it's just, you really just kind of really got to manage and watch your project. Okay. And also the last thing is kind of what the most important thing Rusty kind of commented is know what they were fed at the farm so you can transition them onto perhaps a grower that you're looking at, grass and that you're planning on giving them. So you can gradually have them come on board. Okay. Some kind of county logistics that you might have or might be wondering about as it relates to the sheep project are a couple here that I've stated. I talked about identifying your lambs will be brought into a county tagging or check-in. Like I said, it should be coming up in the next 2 to 3 weeks or maybe a month or so, depending upon when your fair is. And that's when they'll tag your animals and do the paperwork and have it recorded for your lambs. And you'll get usually a beginning weight, so that will help you know and understand how much your lamb should need to be gaining or how many pounds it should gain before the fair. So that will help you out. Usually lambs, people ask me how much do they gain a day. I mean, it's a range because some lambs can do really well and some lambs don't do well. But usually a half a pound to a pound a day is a good gain per day. Some animals won't do that because they might weigh in a little heavier. So you really just need to manage that a bit. Okay. Many counties have requirements about educational credits, and this is very important. Project learning is really important as it relates to not just bringing your animal to the fair and showing it. We really want you to understand how sheep work, all the great things there is to know about the project, how animals work and function. So there's a lot of great educational opportunities your counties might offer at that point. Make sure you know the rules of the show. Your premium books might be online or they might be coming out soon, probably sooner than later. And you should know those rules and make sure you're following them before you go to the fair. Your county would perhaps have a county auction, and every county is different as it relates to how many lambs can be sold, how many animals an exhibitor can sell, period. There's lots of rules as it relates to that. But this gives you the opportunity to sell their animals to a business, a local business, and these funds can help you defray the cost of your project, feed, any other kind of expenses you have, as well as perhaps having some money extra to invest in your project for next year and or for maybe college or other educational opportunities. Okay, some things to think about when you're housing your animals. I know not everybody has the same type of opportunity for that, but when you do think about this, make sure your pens are clean or you're cleaning them often and that they have good bedding. Try not to have too many animals in a pen at once, and make sure there's no foreign objects in the pen that could hurt them or harm them, such as nails, sharp objects, those types of things. And then make sure your feed bunks and water buckets are cleaned periodically. I always say, you know, hey kids, would you drink the water out of that bucket? And most would say no. Then why would our animals like to drink out of that bucket? So really be mindful of that. You are taking care of them. They are in your care, and so these animals are your responsibility. Make sure you're thinking about extremes in weather and how you can manage your facilities if it's really hot or really cold. And then make sure you've got some ventilation or air movement, especially when it gets hot this summer, which I know it will. Okay? Some health, animal health. Sheep typically are an animal project that we're as concerned about with health. We usually talk about that as it relates to swine and perhaps cattle, but make sure your animal is healthy with a couple of those bullet points to look through. And then the last one is, make sure you're keeping track of the guidelines for exhibition, and there's a link there. Those can change at any time depending upon what animal health disease we're concerned about. So make sure you're checking on that as often as you can, okay? I talk a little bit about safety. With sheep, it's not as much of a challenge, but with cattle, we sure talk about safety quite a bit. Sheep are definitely a more gregarious, they stick together, and they're smaller, and they don't cause as much damage to a person. So do be mindful of where animals have a comfort zone. When you're moving them, be mindful where they can see you and they can't. And so sheep, again, aren't as much of a challenge in this regard. I always tell kids too, when you're looking through and trying to catch your animal, everybody tries to catch their animal, the lamb, by their head. And the most appropriate way to catch your animal is by the rear flank from behind. They can't see you. So if you can catch your animal or your sheep like that, that'd be great. I would not try that with beef or pig, but with sheep, that's the most appropriate way to catch your animal. Okay, we've talked a little bit about sheep behavior already tonight, so I'm not going to do this too long. I mean, I think we all know sheep follow one another. So if you want all of your sheep to go in one place, try and get one going in that way, and you'll be fine. Okay. Here's some things to think about as it relates to the fair. If it's really hot and humid and you're uncomfortable, most likely your animals are uncomfortable. So take care of them just as if you would be taking care of yourself in this heat. Okay. Make sure you're keeping good records. This project is really a way to teach you life skills about yourself, how to set goals and meet them, how to think about ways to improve your project and do them, all things that you should be doing and thinking about yourself and how you would want to become, a different career or what goals you have for yourself. So keep those things in mind. Records are important to keep track of your costs and then what you plan to do for next year, because we certainly want you to have a great experience and do it many years in a row. The last part of the project is really the after the show, the end product. And many counties do this in a variety of ways. Some counties have a carcass show where the animals are harvested in most likely a local business or meat plant in the county or a close neighboring county. Or the lamb's ultrasound data is collected. And in that way, it's ranked, and the lambs are then ranked in from top to bottom in an ultrasound show. Because in this type of venue, we're really looking for the top carcass, the top most ideal end product. And this is helpful for kids to know what that looks like. So when they're picking out their animals, they know what to look for. You know, for example, their lamb got too fat and their carcass really showed that there was too much fat on the carcass of their project lamb. Then you can adjust and make changes for next year when you pick out your next animal. Okay? So think about all those things as you think through the end product. Some of the things we look for in carcass evaluation is on the bottom lower picture, you can see what a lamb ribeye looks like, and this is where we take the measurement of the lamb carcasses, how much fat is along the ribeye, and then how big the ribeye is. And usually I always tease people, how many lamb chops does it take to fill you up? Some would say quite a few. Lamb chops are, you know, maybe a third of what a beef ribeye would be. So comparatively, there is definitely a lot less meat on a lamb carcass than there is on a beef animal. We also look at how much leg conformation there is and just overall quality of the animal. Okay, so this is a very important part of the project, and your county will do it in a different way, you know, depending upon what county you reside in here in Wisconsin. Okay. So this slide really kind of speaks to that. We want you to understand that your animal projects are really what is really the vehicle in which we want to teach you other things, such as responsibility and making good decisions and those sorts of things. But, you know, obviously we want you to become a good blue ribbon kid, as we say, but also to have this great experience with your family. This creates great memories for you and your folks, brothers and sisters, siblings, cousins, neighbors, what have you, county friends. This is a great time to spend family time through youth projects. And so, you know, when you're taking your lamb for a walk, you know, grab your mom and dad and take them with you, or, you know, all those sorts of things that you might be thinking of when you want to spend more family time. Okay. With the next, I'm going to pass this right on to Pam Hobson. I know we're getting a little short on time. You've got 15 minutes left. And so I'm going to pass this over to Pam Hobson. She is our 4-H youth development specialist on campus in Madison. She was a 4-H agent in Richland County. I don't know, a lot of years. I don't know if you want to tell us, Pam, but you can. And her animal science degree is from Platteville, so she's got a great knowledge base and comes from a cattle family, Angus cattle operation. So I will invite Pam to join us to talk about sportsmanship to round us up this evening.
Thanks, Bernie. And I really don't mind. I was in Richland County for almost 25 years, and now for about the last year, almost a little over a year now, I've been the youth development ag and animal science specialist coming out of Madison. So it's been a great time. I like Bernie said, I grew up in 4-H and I grew up showing cattle. So the sportsmanship aspect, I learned that as I went along. And I think when we're talking about sportsmanship, a lot of people think sportsmanship is what we do in the showmanship ring. And I like to think about it as, especially if I'm judging a group of animals or whatever, and I'm the judge, I'm looking for a good sportsman all through the whole show. And then that also weighs in with my decision as who's going to win that showmanship contest at the end. So if we can move to the next slide. This one says sportsmanship, what is it? And I like to think about sportsmanship as, think about it as the golden rule. And I think most of us know what the golden rule is. Do unto others as we would like them to do unto you. So if you're a good sportsman, if you were doing something in the show ring and you're being courteous and you're doing all the things right, and if it's like something you would want someone to do to you, that's showing good sportsmanship. Maybe if it's something that you're doing that you wouldn't want someone else to do to you, if you were a judge or something like that, or the ringman or some of our leaders or something, then maybe you're not being quite as good sportsmanship. On the next slide, there's a few things that says conduct becoming to individual involving fairness, honest competition, and we're going to go through each one of these on the next slide, so I won't get into them too much right now. Courteous relationships and graceful acceptance of the results. For conduct, high personal standards of behavior or represent your family, your community, your club. If you show in other shows, or it might be state fair or something like that, you're definitely representing your county. Or if you show at national shows, you're representing Wisconsin as well. So make sure when you're thinking about this that when you're out there showing and that you show good sportsmanship no matter where you're at, because they're thinking about where you came from as well. Fairness. Learn and understand the rules. Lots of times, I know Bernie talked about this earlier, the rules change, so make sure you're checking on those rules from year to year. Don't make an assumption that something hasn't changed and you forget to look at it, and you get into that show ring or you get down to the state fair or wherever you might be showing that animal and find out, oh, I did something wrong or I forgot to do something. And if you did, accept that you made a mistake. The other thing is be honest. I think honesty is a great character building thing for everyone. It demonstrates integrity. It shows you what you're doing. We like to say in 4-H that do your own work. And we know if you're a brand new project member, maybe you're your first year in the sheep project, and you may need some help from your parents or something, and that's fine. That's what we need to do. That's how we learn. And then as you get older, you'll be able to do some of those things by yourself that you weren't able to do when you were a younger 4-H member. So just be honest with others, be truthful and fair, and just do everything that you would like others to do with you as well. Next slide. What makes a good sport, or what makes you a good sport? In competition, understand all the contestants are after the same thing that you are. They all want to be winners, but you have to remember that there's always going to be losers as well, especially when we're looking at maybe the grand champion market lamb. There can only be one grand champion market lamb, and everybody else may think, oh man, I'm a loser. Well, no, you're not. It's not that because it's all the things we talked about, Bernie talked about before. It's if you've learned something, you have some fun doing it, met some new people. Those are the things. Everybody's a winner when they do those kinds of things and are good sports about it. Courtesy. Be nice toward other participants or spectators, judges, officials, your leaders, your parents. Grandma and grandpa might be there. Don't do anything that you wouldn't be proud to tell your grandma and grandpa about that you did. Lots of times, sometimes you may have a question, and that's great. But also, just remember when you're asking those questions, do it politely and try to keep your emotions under control. We know sometimes when we're in a competitive situation, we lose a little bit of sometimes our emotions get the best of us. So just keep that in mind and keep those under control as much as you can. And most judges, I know Todd was saying that he likes to have conversations with the youth that are showing as he's judging, and that's good too. And if you have questions or something afterwards and you want to go to the judge, that's fine usually, but do it in a courteous way. Graceful acceptance of the results. Accept the results and decisions with a positive attitude. It's always great to congratulate the person that's ahead of you or the people that beat you in your class or whatever. A lot of people that are on the show circuit for the summer or something. I remember back when I was showing, there was one summer when each of us had two really good heifers. We'd go to one show and one person would win, and the next show the other one might win. You have to remember, it's one person's opinion, the judge's opinion on that one particular day. And especially when we're showing animals and stuff, they don't always look the same every time you show them, because they may be having an off day just like we do as people. maybe they're not feeling quite as good at this show and everything. So if you won at one show, it doesn't really mean you're going to win at the other one. And if you don't win at that one, be happy about it. And let people know that. Be happy if you win, but gracious, thank all those people that helped you make that a winning animal. So sportsmanship, I found this little quote and it says, it's your response to winning and losing that makes you a winner or loser. It doesn't really matter if you're winning that purple ribbon or whatever in the course of your life, but of how you accept that winning or losing, what you do about it is one that makes you a winner. So I would say with sportsmanship, go out there, respond in a way that's going to make you look like a winner in life, and that you're willing to accept the results. And then if you do win, accept those winnings with graciousness. And the last slide, sportsmanship, it says practice it today and every day. And it kind of goes back to that golden rule. Remember that, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And, practice makes perfect. So make sure that you're practicing good sportsmanship, not only in the sheep show ring, but everywhere in your life, because with your good sportsman, people will like you, and it will make a big difference in your life. So I don't know if there's any questions, but I'd be glad to do those as well.
Okay, if you've got any questions for Pam, you can go ahead and start typing them into the chat box. While I'm waiting for those, I'm just going to go through a few more slides here. Here are some resources that I think you will find helpful. There's a sheep resource handbook that Ohio State University put together, and it's available for a nominal fee. I think it's between $15 and $20, and it's a really great guide for newer members. Our youth livestock program website as well, and then if you just go /sheep, that'll take you to the sheep page. Okay. Another thing here this evening that I would like you to do, you would have received a hand copy or a paper copy in your email, but I'd really like you to go online and click on this link and do it online. That really saves me. Otherwise, I have to type all of them in, and to be truthful, I really don't have the time to do that. So if you could click on this Google link form, you can type in your thoughts and evaluation from this evening. You can tell us, what you really got out of it. What would you like to see more of? If we would do this again, or other opportunities would come forward, what thoughts would you like? So it's really imperative that you do this evaluation for us. It only helps us know what we're doing for you is what you need. Okay. The next webinar is the last webinar. It's May 15th, again at 6 to 7:30. So pass it on to your meat goat folks or others of interest of the meat goat area. All of the past recordings from the ones that we've had previously and then today's will be available at this link on that second bullet, FYI, and yada, yada, yada. It's a livestock learning webinar series. And you can click on that link and you can access the past recording. Tonight's recording won't most likely be available until this weekend or even Monday. So be mindful of that if you're looking forward to not seeing it. It's not up yet. Okay? I really appreciate all of you being on this evening, and our speakers. Thanks, Pam, for being on and helping us out to talk about the sportsmanship and how to handle ourselves in competition. While competition is very important in learning, it also is more important than on how we handle ourselves in competition. So I appreciate Pam's job on that. Again, please evaluations. Have a wonderful Easter and holiday or a Holy Week. And if you've got any questions, you can contact me at my email address below. And that should really conclude our session this evening. Have a wonderful night. Good night, everyone.